All right. Well, welcome. Welcome to the Bellwether College Consortium Summer Innovation Series. My name is Rose Martinez. I serve as the director for the consortium, which is a nationally respected and member-supported think tank. It's made up of award-winning colleges, which include our recent Bellwether Award recipient, who we are pleased to have with us today. It is my pleasure to welcome SUNY Orange to this webinar series and to again congratulate them on achieving such a high honor. This Bellwether Award-winning team took top honors in the category of instructional programs and services. Their program, titled From Remediation to Momentum, in all caps, Rethinking Math Placement, is a faculty-led guided self-placement process paired with a comprehensive redesign of the developmental mathematics curriculum. The GSP model integrates students' prior coursework and mathematical confidence supported by guidance from advisors. Simultaneously, the developmental mathematics course sequence was accelerated and complemented with co-requisite supports that allow more students to enroll directly in gateway courses. They'll talk about the incredible results, but it is my honor to welcome them. But before I delve into the interview with our esteemed guests, permit me to share a little more about the consortium for those of you who are new or may have come upon our website or received this through an email. The Bellwether College Consortium is charged with addressing critical issues facing community colleges through applied research and the promotion and replication of best practices. For 32 years, we have hosted a highly competitive Bellwether Award competition where three college programs demonstrating innovation, scalability, replicability, and most importantly, evidence-based and equity-focused outcomes in one of the three categories are named as our top Bellwether awardees. We host the annual Bellwether Award competition for public community colleges in the U.S. and also U.S. territories. Those colleges are also eligible to submit entries. We receive numerous submissions. After a stringent first round of evaluations, 30 go on to compete for the Bellwether Award, and they are deemed Bellwether finalists. Among the finalists, 3 award winners are chosen in the categories of workforce development, instructional programs and services, and planning, governance, and finance. The final round takes place at what is called the Community College Futures Assembly. It's held in late February in San Antonio, Texas. We encourage all our community colleges to consider applying for one or more of our awards, and we ask you to visit bellwethercollegeconsortium.com for more information. The 2027 competition opens in June, so you'll look on our website and the submission portal will open then. So we encourage all community colleges with a program that they would like to consider us scoring and possibly moving you on to a Bellwether finalist to submit your entry. So with that short intro, let's welcome our honorees. We are excited to host SUNY Orange from New York to our innovation series. The purpose of the series is to inspire community colleges across the nation to learn from and replicate successful initiatives vetted by our panel of expert judges. Our guests today are Erika Hackman. Dr. Erika Hackman serves as Provost and VP for Academic Affairs and Student Services. Kaitlin Curry, who is a mathematics professor. Dr. Josh Lavorgna, who is an AVO for Business, Math, Science, and Technology and Effectiveness. Donna Avery, who is also a mathematics professor and assistant chair. And then finally, Dr. Christine Leroux, who is a mathematics professor. Welcome you all. Again, congratulations on being named an award winner. Let's get started with the conversation. First, I'd like to pass this off to Dr. Hackman. For our viewers who may not know about SUNY Orange, please share some background and demographics that depict the uniqueness and general characteristics of your college campus.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Martinez. What a thrill it is to continue to share this model and the work with our community college partners across the country. We're just thrilled to have been recognized for this very student-centered and impactful work that we've done at SUNY Orange. So as you'll see on the next slide, there are some snapshot details here, but I'd like to highlight some of them just to give you a little bit of background about SUNY Orange. So again, SUNY Orange, we're also known as Orange County Community College. We are part of the State University of New York system. So we are one of 30 community colleges that are part of the SUNY, again, the State University of New York system. We have two campuses, and we are not a residential campus. So we do not have any dorms. We're a commuter campus. We have a long history. We actually just celebrated our 75th anniversary last year. And importantly, our healthcare programs really drive a lot of our enrollments here at the college. And so you'll see on the slide here, we actually founded the very first two-year associate degree in nursing program in the entire country. But that 75 years of history has really evolved and changed over time. And so you'll see we serve a little over 4,000 students, about 4,400 students a year. That was our fall 2025 snapshot. But as I said, demographically, as community colleges, we respond to the needs of our county. That is our service area. And so we are about 65 miles from New York City, and really in a fairly suburban and somewhat rural environment, but an increasingly Hispanic demographic in our county. And so in 2020, we earned the designation as a Hispanic serving institution. And that has been really an important part of our college and its identity and the students we serve. And you'll hear later today when we talk about some of the outcomes, how we paid particular attention to equity in the outcomes as well.
Great. Thank you for that, Erika. That's an excellent overview. I learned a lot just from this graphic, so I appreciate that. It's very thorough. The next question, we're actually digging into the actual program. So if Dr. Lavorgna, if you can take this next question, talk to me about what was the pressing issue SUNY Orange sought to address when it embarked on this Rethinking Math Placement and Pathways program. If you can walk us through how the Math Pathways reform was developed from initial concept to implementation, that would be quite helpful. And then who were the stakeholders?
Great. Thank you. I'd be happy to. So I like to think of it as a perfect storm. We had a few issues at play, and I think as a math department at the time, we recognized that these issues were there. We just couldn't maybe put our fingers on them. And so I'll talk about a couple of the pieces that we were looking at. Starting with our placement exam. So as a department, we knew that a high stakes placement exam wasn't really working for us. We knew the national research, as quoted on the slide here, showed that was problematic and misplaced students, and we lived that here at SUNY Orange. So we recognized that to be the case, and we wanted to do something about it. And we had a small group of math faculty putting their heads together to see if a multiple measures placement exam would work for us. It was a little bit of a bumpy ride trying to think about, could we get the data? How would this look? And so it was a work in progress, I'd say. At the same time, the placement exam, that high stakes placement exam that we had been using for years, was undergoing a redesign, and we had to implement that redesign, that redesigned placement exam at the college. And we did that right before the pandemic. And we were not pleased with the results of how that placed our students. We had a lot of students misplaced, even more so than the previous version. And at that point, it was heightened, our senses were heightened that we had to do something about it. I would just point, I'm going to skip to this fourth bullet here quickly. One thing we saw, and this is in 2017, so with the old placement exam that we used, we saw that 73% of our Black students, 62% of our Hispanic students, and 57% of our white students were placing into developmental math at either the lowest or second lowest level. And so we, weren't happy with those numbers. And then given the challenges that I've talked about with the placement exam, we were on a mission to do something about that. And at the same time, as that was all coming together, it was COVID. And we were not able to use that high stakes placement exam. And so we had to quickly come up with a way to place our students. We had students ready to register. Our friends in student services were looking for some guidance from the math department. And so we decided, given our challenges with being online at the time, that we would let students place themselves and put some guide rails around that. And that's exactly what we did. And we'll talk a little bit more later about some of those problems that we encountered there. But that's how we kicked off the placement. Now, I would say in a parallel universe, we were also aware that our math pathways were problematic. So we had all of our students being funneled into a algebra track, even when students didn't need to be on that track and would struggle on that track. So we were trying to rethink and reshape as the college was embarking on some guided pathways work, how we could get students in an alternate pathway. And my colleague, Kaitlin Curry, will talk a little bit about this in another slide. But that was also, part of the problem that we were trying to solve. And then lastly, I would say, for framing the problem, our developmental sequence was problematic. We had multiple levels of developmental coursework. So at the time, if a student placed in the lowest level math class, developmental math class at SUNY Orange, it would take them 3 semesters, if they were successful every time, to get to what we would consider a gateway or a gen ed level mathematics course. And so that, compounded with the placement, the high stakes placement, and the students on the wrong pathway, all was creating this problem and pile up for our students not being successful with their coursework.
Thank you for that. What a compelling story. Yeah, I mean, the external factors, the internal challenges, all of this, as you say, was the perfect storm. And hopefully we're going to hear more about how that was addressed. Next, I'd like to have Dr. Leroux walk us through the design and development phase. Walk us through how math pathways reform was developed from the initial concept to implementation. Who were the stakeholders and what was the most critical issue shaping that design?
So our development and really exploration was completely faculty run. There was a course release for a small faculty group, and that work was done through backwards design. It was really looking at further coursework. What are the key concepts that students really need to master? And then taking some time to take the key elements from all of those developmental classes and make sure that we address those fully, comprehensively in our work, while simultaneously not overwhelming the classes. We could not make one class that was the 9 credits of all of these previous developmental work. So the faculty really got together, and week by week they met, they developed a co-requisite model is what they ended up settling on, to ensure that they could bring all students into their subsequent coursework with the expertise they needed and the subject matter mastery. This was designed in a small group, but it was brought back to the department, and there were regular conversations in the department meetings so that all faculty were on board. This was an entire department project, and the entire department needed to be on board to ensure that the process was successful. For us, our key stakeholders were, of course, the faculty. The math faculty were where we needed the heart of the project to live. And advising was another key component, because the advisors with the new course sequence, along with the new placement process, needed to understand all of this and be on board and have their questions answered to make sure that students were going into the right courses and knowing what to expect in the new courses. The registrar, our Office of Admissions, our institutional research office, they needed to know that about the changes. This is changing reporting. This is changing how things are being tracked at the college. Our informational technology department, all the department chairs, math classes touch each program at the college. So we needed all departments to understand the changes that were being made so that they could then make the appropriate changes in their own programs. And of course, administration support. If we didn't have that administrative support, there wouldn't have been a project to do. The way that we really worked through this development was a communications roadshow. We tailored information to each group on campus, because this redesign really did touch all aspects of the college. And so ensuring that the right people had the right information at the right time, that was something that we really did very deliberatively and took the time to develop the timeline, make sure that we had people in the place that they needed to be.
Thank you. I like that name, Communications Roadshow. I'm going to steal that. The next question is for Kaitlin Curry. Kaitlin, what evidence-based models or national frameworks informed yours and your team's approach, and how did y'all adapt to fit SUNY Orange's student population?
Thanks, Rose. Yeah, so we kind of started before the pandemic. We were looking into alternate options for our students, as Josh had mentioned, with all of our students being funneled into the algebra track. We wanted to see what other options there might be. And so there were a group of faculty members who explored Carnegie Foundation's Quantway and Statway courses. And so we did wind up going to a few conferences and learning more about the courses for Quantway, and we implemented that on our campus for students who maybe didn't need to be on an algebra track. Initially, it was a few faculty members that had explored this, but then more of our faculty got trained in that to be able to teach that course. And that's where we really started learning more about the growth mindset philosophy and being able to incorporate that into courses so that students could be more successful. Then we, as a college, went under a guided pathways review. And so that also was a college-wide effort where we designed our academic communities, and in turn, every department reevaluated the appropriate math course for their degree sequence. And so again, to try to really hone it down to see what course would be the best for that particular program, we helped the other departments on campus decide whether it would be most appropriate for their students to have an algebra course, or perhaps statistics would be the most appropriate course, or maybe our liberal arts math course. And so each department went through and decided how that would best serve their students. In conjunction with that, the math department reevaluated some of our course prerequisites to try to streamline the experience there, because again, we were unintentionally having some unnecessary barriers there. One example is that our intermediate algebra course, which is also a gen ed math course, was the prerequisite for our Math for Liberal Arts course. And so any student that kind of just needed their liberal arts math would have already taken an algebra course, and then they really probably wouldn't need those two gen ed math courses. So we kind of realized, wait a second, this isn't really the appropriate path. And so we wanted to make those paths more clear for both the students and also for our advising staff to be able to help students get into the correct course so that they could complete their math and complete their degree, because a lot of times it's found that that gateway math course is a barrier to degree completion for students, and we wanted to try to help avoid that as much as possible. And so then that was all things that we had started before the pandemic. And then after the pandemic, and like Josh had talked about with redesigning our placement, we then wanted to look back into the co-requisite model because our English department had also moved to a co-requisite model right around like the semester before spring 2020. They were kind of moving that in that direction. And so then we saw a lot of, what our colleagues were having success with that model as well. And so that's why we kind of decided to explore that. And so that was through the SUNY Math Pathways, and they were in conjunction with the Dana Center. They also had a lot of evidence and materials for us to look at and decide what we wanted to do at SUNY Orange. And that gave us a lot of opportunity to collaborate with our sister institutions in the SUNY network. And we brought all of that information back to SUNY Orange and were able to then tailor that to, what's going to work best for our students. So again, we have kind of these three, national and regional networks that we were able to then use the information from those places to see what would work best for our students at SUNY Orange.
Great, thank you for that overview. It was a really interesting. The next question, I believe it's something you can answer as well. Kaitlin, how did you structure the staffing for the new pathways, and what strategies did you use to build faculty buy-in and address concerns which, always come up? And then how did you support those instructors through this transition?
Yeah. So when we designed our co-requisites, we used something called the cohort model. So all of our students who are in the co-requisite course are also in the credit-bearing college level course that's paired with it. And we are having the same faculty member teach both of those courses. So I know sometimes when they do co-requisites, there might be a different faculty member for each of those courses. But at our institution, we felt that it would be best for our students if we had the same instructor for both of those courses. And we're using the model of just-in-time remediation. So even though they're technically two separate courses, we incorporate the co-requisite material as the semester goes on and the students need it for that college level coursework. And so again, that's why we chose to have the same instructor so they can just incorporate both of those pieces into the course as the semester went on. And this didn't require any additional staffing or hiring of new staffing because all of our full-time faculty members and part-time faculty members that we currently had were able to teach these courses. And so it did take a little bit of retraining just to see how the restructuring was. But, as Christine had mentioned, most of those topics that we were teaching were already somewhere else in our sequence, and we just kind of restructured. And so everyone was used to teaching these courses. Maybe they just had to see, okay, how are we going to now do it in this new sequence? It wasn't like it was this brand new design of you have to now, prepare to teach a whole new course where it's different material. And so our co-requisites vary in credit hours, which has been, a little bit of a different in terms of scheduling in that way. But again, we didn't have to hire any additional or new folks to be able to teach these courses. And so even though the initial design was done by a faculty work group, the whole course sequence and co-requisite courses were really honed during our department meetings. So that faculty work group, like Christine had mentioned, would meet and discuss different things that they had seen in the resources that we had and kind of make some decisions about proposals that we'd want to bring forward. And then all of that got brought back to the department. So I think in that way, we really helped with addressing some of the concerns and getting faculty buy-in early on, because even though there was a work group that was working on it initially, all of the department members were able to give feedback. And so in our department, we all use as much as possible the same textbook for our students. So we brought like textbook suggestions to the department and had a few other faculty members look into those and give feedback. We brought all of the course topics that we were proposing and our student learning outcomes to the department, the course descriptions, the syllabi, all of those materials were brought to the department for review. And we then could take any information that the whole department wanted to look at and make those changes. And along the way, we were also very transparent about the fact that we knew these would need to be refined, both the placement and our course sequence over time. So we weren't saying, this is going to be a one-time change and we're never going to look at it again. It was like, okay, we're going to do the best we can this first time, and then we'll see what happens. And so I think that also helped with the faculty buy-in to say, like, this isn't a done deal. As we see how it goes, we can go back and tweak things to make it the best for our students. And we also were very committed to making sure that we were going to analyze data and collect feedback from instructors. And so over the course of time where we've been teaching these courses, we've had many department conversations at meetings. We've also sent surveys to both our full-time and our adjunct faculty who are teaching the courses, just to say, like, how are these things working? Is there something that you would think we should try to do differently? And things like that. And so I think that really has helped with people feeling like even if they weren't maybe part of the initial group who designed the course, they still had a part in working through this all. And so I just think that that's been really great for our department. And in terms of faculty support, we did do some professional development, which Donna Avery will talk about a little bit more, but we offered professional development, and in order to help with our adjuncts, to make sure that they were compensated fairly, we did have, when they came in for these opportunities, they were compensated for that participation. And again, those ongoing conversations with faculty, that we include all faculty teaching the courses, not just our full-time that are at our department meetings. We also reach out to our adjunct instructors too, and always invite them to be a part of it as well, because their feedback is also very valuable. And so, yeah, that's kind of how we approached those things. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just, I like to think of this word inclusivity and everything that you were talking about, and how important that is when you're trying to get so many people on the same page, particularly faculty, to not only buy in, but to offer their expertise as members of that group and what they bring to the table. And the data informed, process is just so critical. So thank you for sharing all of those pieces. I think that'll be very helpful to our colleges that might want to venture into this work. The next question is more about financing and resource allocation. So Josh, I'll have you take this one. Funding sources, institutional, state grant, external, what were the sources that helped support this reform, and how did you prioritize resource allocation to ensure the sustainability of this model?
Right. Thanks, Rose. I would say we were very fortunate, again, in the way the timing worked out for us, having explored both the Quantway through Carnegie that Kaitlin mentioned, and the SUNY math pathways. And that allowed us some opportunity to tap into some funding sources that SUNY had secured. And I think that was very important for the development here, so that the faculty in the department had an opportunity to explore alternate pathways and the co-requisite models. And at the time, it would have been somewhat burdensome on the college to support that amount of travel and connection with our sister institutions, both in SUNY and across the country, frankly, with looking at the Quantway work. And so we were lucky to tap into that funding through SUNY. So we were, I would say that, definitely a state funding source, which came from various different grants that the state secured. And the release time that we've talked about a couple of times now, that was also paid through that SUNY math pathways, which was key to give the faculty members. We had 4 faculty members that took the initial deep dive into creating the co-requisites. And that release time, like I said, it was just non-negotiable, because they needed that time to really think it through. The chair and the assistant chair of the department was part of the group, did not take the release time. So we just had those 4 faculty members working through that. But again, that was all through state funding. I just wanted to take the opportunity to double down that to me that was key. We also, again, it was a small amount of funds overall to make this reform work, but we knew we had to prioritize our adjuncts, and bringing our adjuncts in to talk about the changes to the curriculum, the changes to the sequence, how the co-requisites would work with the courses that they were attached to. This was totally new for us. And so, we had the full-time faculty captured in department meetings, if you will, but we knew we needed to find some time for the adjuncts, and that was important. So again, the SUNY Math Pathways money allowed us to, pay those adjuncts to be a part of it. And then I believe Donna will talk a little bit soon about some of the resources or some of the professional development we did, but we knew there was, a minimal amount of resources that we wanted to be able to provide to the faculty, both full-time and part-time, whether it was around the co-recs or our implementation of embedding the growth mindset into the curriculum in those co-requisite courses. So we knew what we had, we knew what we needed. We needed for that release time, we needed to be able to purchase some materials, and we needed to be able to stipend the adjuncts to go above and beyond to help learn about what we were looking at. Overall, I would say, just as a little aside, this initiative with both the placement exam and the co-requisite work and the pathways work was not very expensive to the institution. So, the chair, the assistant chair, as part of their workload, are regularly reviewing the placement and then how the students do. That's ongoing work that I don't see us ever moving away from. I mean, it gets better and better, but it's times change. So, but that is just part of the workload. Again, the faculty, we already had the faculty, they were already teaching. It was just that we're cutting it up and slicing it up a little bit differently of how it looks for the students. So there was no need for additional faculty to support this particular venture. And I want to also mention for folks who might be from the student services side of the house, I think initially working with our our testing center and our advisors, they definitely had to put more time in, but those folks were so dedicated to dedicated to making this change happen for the betterment of our students. And I think in some ways just relieved that the math department was open to this. And so, there was some initial time investment, but now, there's no additional resources needed to keep that end of the bargain. And in fact, in the testing center, it's probably, with our math placement survey, it's probably a little bit less work for them because they're not proctoring in-person high stakes placement exams. So.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I just feel like, including the adjuncts, it's such a valuable piece of information because sometimes they get left behind, and I think it hopefully creates staying power within that group and growth and more dedication to their position. So all of the above, but yes, I think those were really key. The stipend, the release time, and that's what builds a strong model. You mentioned Donna. So Donna, this question's for you. Miss Avery, what types of professional development, as Josh was alluding to, were essential for faculty and staff for this model to take off? And how did you incorporate ongoing research, data analysis, feedback loops, all of those things to refine the pathways over time?
Thank you. So let's start with the professional development. We had a series of workshops for faculty and staff. We had just a general overview that was open to the entire college of this is what we're going to be doing. These are the changes we're making, both with our placement and with our math sequence. And that was attended by people from all across the college. And then we had specific workshops for our adjunct faculty. We had one where we just talked about growth mindset and what that means and had a good discussion based on Carol Dweck's work. So we talked all about growth mindset and how to incorporate that into a class, because we were asking people to kind of teach maybe with different language than what they've been used to in the past, and try and incorporate just the growth mindset language into their teaching, as well as some growth mindset activities. We had a single presentation that was for academic advising. It was tailored to them, that talked about how the new placements would work with the sequence and what it would mean. We had our leadership team meetings and smaller meetings with department chairs where we talked about the changes that we were making. And we also created some documentation. So we had a flow chart about the new math sequence, and we had a documentation for the advisors that was talking about how the old placements would work with the new sequence and where they should help students enroll in the various courses. As Josh mentioned, we do look at the placement at the end of each semester. We look at how the people that were placed in a specific course, their success in that course, and we have made refinements over the first few years. We made more refinements, and now we've kind of leveled out for a little bit now, but we do still look at that every semester. Well, after the fall semester where we have the most students, new students enrolling. Refining the courses, we had departmental conversations and surveys during the first semester when we taught the course. And then the semester after, we had just good discussions about what worked well, what didn't work well. And we ended up suggesting a different arrangement of topics in one of the courses because instructors noted that some of the topics that were at the very end of the course weren't getting the attention that they deserved. So we rearranged some things so that that could be taught at a little bit deeper level. Going forward, we want to continue to improve our success rates. So we are still looking at both the placements and the course sequence and how we can improve those. And we're going to be looking, now we are at the point where we're starting to have enough data where we can start to look at how have our changes impacted subsequent coursework and graduation rates.
Wonderful. I look forward to seeing that data. I'm really interested. I think you have the next question, Donna, and it kind of alludes to that. So outcomes and impact. From what you know today and now, and of course why you won the bellwether, has a lot to do with your measurable outcomes that you've seen since implementing math pathways. So can you talk about those course completions, the progression, equity gaps, or where those have been reduced? What were the results, and what has been most significant and surprising?
Yes. So I have 4 bullets here of like the highlights of the things that excited us the most. First was the proportion of students that we're placing into the lowest developmental levels. Before our changes, they were about 37%. Not great. After our changes, now they're in the mid-teens, and that seems like a more reasonable amount of students to need this level of mathematics support. At the same time, our enrollment has gone up, but we actually have about only half of the number of students placing at the developmental level than we had previously. So even with increased enrollment, fewer students are having to take additional math courses. Josh had talked about on one of the earlier slides that 73% of our Black students in 2017 placed into a developmental course level. That's down to about 20% now, which is still higher than the overall, which is in the mid-teens. So we're still working on that. But we're really thrilled with that change for our Black students. The next is how fast are they getting through the sequence? We know that completing a college level math course is related to graduation rates. So we have increased the percentage of students that have placed at a developmental level, and we looked at how many were completing their first college level math course in 1 year, in 2 years, and in 3 years. Before our changes, about 20% of our students were completing their first college level math course in 1 year. Now that's over 40%. And I can say also that 40% that are completing their first college level math course in 1 year is a higher percent than what we're completing it in 3 years before our changes. So we've really made a great impact on the percentage of students that are able to complete their college level math course, and we're hoping that is helping with our retention and graduation rates. And then finally, even though more of our students are getting through the college level math course, we were worried, like, have our standards lowered or anything like that, but we're seeing that the success rates in that first college level math course have remained stable, even though we have a much larger number of students that are completing those courses.
Thank you. Those are wonderful outcomes and impacts to share. Gosh, we're already down to our final question. So this is more about lessons learned and the replication, which is the crux of why we do these series of interviews. So Dr. Leroux, I'd like you to take this on. Also know that it's been tremendously insightful to hear from the whole team. But before we close, I share the most important lessons learned and what you can share with other colleges seeking to replicate this work, and what would you do differently, if anything, if starting this again?
We really do believe that faculty leadership is essential. The math faculty had to believe in the process. They had to own the work. It really needed to be a faculty driven experience. And as part of that, the course release that Josh was speaking about, that was vital. They needed the time and the space to do that work. There were a lot of passionate conversations and really hashing things out as part of this process. They needed that space to be able to do that work. They also needed the access to research and institutional data so they could see what the experience of the students was throughout their math sequence. They also needed to believe that refinement was going to become part of the routine work of the department. It is just part of what we do, that continuous improvement piece. We also think that collaboration and communication is vital. Engaging those key stakeholders early and often, we think that was something that was key to the success of the project. As an example, Donna had mentioned with the advising office that we had a meeting just with them. Some of the documentation we had with the flowcharts, they had some suggestions about how to alter them to make it work best for them. That communication really was how we found out what would work best for them and what were the resources they needed to make it work for their department. We also really believe in that designing a communication strategy and timeline. The people at the college needed that just-in-time support as well. So as the faculty were about to head into faculty advising, they had documents distributed right before that. The kind of information that they needed was different than what the advising office needed, which was different than what the registrar's office needed. This needed to all be timed out to what the various colleagues around the campus would need. And we invited feedback from all areas. We were very transparent. It was mentioned previously that we knew that this would not be perfect the first round. We knew that this was going to be an iterative process to make things better for all our students. And we needed that feedback. So it was very open that if you have feedback, if you've noticed things, please get back to us. And then we discussed all of these items and brought them back to those areas. There has to be a commitment to ongoing refinement. If we're going to say that we will make improvements and we will take in the feedback, that has to be a commitment by the department. That has to be a commitment that we're going to live and make things better as we go. And as part of that, that ongoing data monitoring is non-negotiable. Those were our key takeaways from the process and what we really feel like fueled our success.
Thank you for that. Thank you for laying all that out. I took some notes, but I love the own the process, own the work is so critical, because if you don't have ownership, then you just don't feel like there's a need for change sometimes. And that's just all of us. All of us want to be included in a process that we feel like we're valued, that our knowledge is listened to, that is shared, that it is part of this ongoing, as you know, we all try to emulate continuous improvement in all our work. But thank you so much, every one of you, for sharing your knowledge and your insights with us today. I wish you best success on behalf of the Bellwether College Consortium for continued success with your Math Pathways model. To our audience, thank you for being with us today, and consider applying to compete for a Bellwether Award. The portal, again, like I said, will open in June for the 2027 national competition and can be accessed at bellwethercollegeconsortium.com under our Bellwether Award tab. So please look forward to seeing that soon. If I can again thank Doctors Hackman, Lavorgna, Leroux, as well as Kaitlin Curry and Donna Avery for this excellent presentation. Thank you for sharing so much more about this award-winning program. Again, wish you continued success, and this concludes our innovation session for today. Thank you.